It's that time of the year again. Did your favorite DLC get nominated? The Game Awards have always been controversial since its creation about 10 years ago now, and it's only gotten worse every year. Not in the nominations itself, then in the show or the production around it, and obviously this year is no different. This year, at least before the show, we'll see how the actual show goes itself. The controversy surrounds Elden Ring's DLC getting nominated for Game of the Year. Personally, of course, I don't think DLCs should be in the same category as full-blown games, no matter the size of the DLC, really. I think personally there should be a DLC category because there have been some really good DLCs over the years, such as Blood and Wine for Witcher 3, Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk 27, and like half the DLCs for Vampire Survivors. Most of them don't get talking about, but they're all really, really good. And that's just to name a few. And the category may encourage developers to actually make good DLC instead of some of these ones which are just cosmetics and just small gameplay features. I think the main issue people have, and the issue I personally have with it, is that it takes away a spot from a new game that could be a part of the category instead of something that just really expands on an existing game. New games tend to evolve quite massively, or at least should evolve massively from the previous iteration, or any other requirements that you may have for Game of the Year. Now, you could obviously say that if they really wanted to add a new game there, they could obviously just have an extra spot, and to a degree that is technically correct, but having these 6 predetermined slots allows for them to get their disappointment out early, that their game wasn't nominated, and then they can make their choice out of the 6 selected slots, and the split doesn't go too many different directions. There's a good chance, as we've seen in previous years, that one game clearly comes out on top, and majority of people aren't really upset. One way they could easily avoid this is to have nominations open up to the public instead of having their choice of game media decide what is nominated. We all know that these categories are decided 90% by these gaming journalism companies instead of the public, so maybe the public should have the option, and then the journalist companies then decide the Game of the Year instead of most of this just coming down to games journalists deciding what comes out on top, when a lot of the time the public tends to not agree with these gaming companies. Hopefully they do learn from this and sort it next year, either with a certain category or doing like a honorable mention sort of thing. But I do worry they might overcorrect this because they tend to do this when there's massive complaints about certain things. So I believe it was 2022, there was the whole long speeches thing, and there was some complaints about speeches taking up so much of the show. So in 2023 last year, they basically cut people off massively. I think it was Baldur's Gate 3. They were thanking people who had died while working on this game because they obviously worked during COVID, family members, that sort of thing. And they started trying to play the music to get them off while these people were tearful. And, that's a big complaint I had about last year. So hopefully they don't overcompensate and be like, okay, no DLCs anywhere, because DLCs are a part of the game and they are part of an improvement to a game. So there's nothing wrong about them being mentioned or being nominated in some categories, but in terms of Game of the Year, it's in the wrong category. Maybe they should have put it in ongoing games or community support or something like that to, honor the game if they wanted to do it that way. But yeah, like I'm saying, putting it in the Game of the Year just doesn't make sense to me personally. Obviously, the DLC issue is just a issue from this year. The Game Awards do have a lot of issues inherently. Firstly, there was 100% favoritism every year. It's no secret that Jeff Neely, I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, loves Kojima. Every time he brings him on stage to talk about a new game or his current game or whatever, he'll spend 10, 20 minutes talking to this guy. And then if he brings somebody else onto stage that he doesn't care about, he'll get 5 minutes max if lucky. It also kind of goes further than that. I've noticed, at least a few years I've been paying attention. I can't really say about 10 years ago. I wasn't watching it 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was 16. I just played Minecraft, I'm pretty sure. But especially recently, indie games tend to get largely ignored outside of certain categories, such as narrative ones, where they talk about, deep issues in certain regions or certain topics, such as LGBTQ wars, stuff like that. Those tend to be indie games, mostly because large companies won't really touch those topics too heavily, usually hint at it. Most people miss the entire concept of Cyberpunk 2027 somehow, which is insane to me because it's right in your face and some people still miss it. Whereas these indie games don't tend to skirt around anything at all. Especially with more more controversial topics, so they tend to get shoved to a little category, and then when the Game Award comes along, they'll just announce it in a rapid succession. Another issue is that Game of the Year games tend to get nominated in a lot of categories. Someone made a post where they're like, oh, Elden Ring got nominated for 5 categories, Silent Hill 2 is nominated for 5 categories, uh, blah 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 is nominated for all of them, that sort of thing. And it's just, I don't think there's any pride in them being nominated for that many categories. I feel like it should be limited to 2 or 3, so that way other games can shine in different categories as well. And I feel like some of these games also in some other categories, not Game of the Year, at least most of the time, tend to get nominated just because they're made by large studios. I can't help but put a little tin foil hat on and consider the fact that this could be because they want big studios to announce their next big game at his Game Awards. It feels like some of these nominations are here to please big studios, so that they can announce the next Assassin's Creed or show off the next GTA trailer at one of their shows, instead of actually celebrating and appreciating games. There isn't really any appreciation for games during this, it's more about hyping up what's coming next. And the award part is more of a secondary part to the Game Awards when it should be the primary focus. They will once again rush through a bunch of these categories with little to no fanfare, just so that they can have Ubisoft or Nintendo or Sony make you watch a CGI trailer that won't release for another 2 to 5 years, be a buggy mess at launch, and then receive a 7.8 on IGN. There is no celebration of actual games in these awards. It's all about showing off what's coming up and sometimes talking about what happened this year, if you're lucky. If your favourite game of the year is Star Wars Outlaws, good for you. I'm glad you have a game that you love so much. I don't ever want to take that away from someone. But when reviews and public opinion is largely, it's okay, why on earth is it nominated for multiple categories? I can maybe understand accessibility. I don't really look at accessibility options too much because I'm not sort of person that needs that sort of features. So admittedly, I'm not well versed in that. So maybe they had really good accessibility. But for best action adventure, there is 5 nominations in that category, and they tell me that's the best you could come up with. I could think of 3 right now that are way better. Power World. I could rant on about this for quite a while, but I want to keep this short and sweet as much as possible. But call me pessimistic, because you're probably right about it, but these nominations should not be taken seriously. And if you can't take the nominations seriously, you shouldn't take the winners seriously either. In the end of the day, play what interests you and choose your own winners, and you'll probably be happier in life in general, let alone in just gaming.